Shipping, billing, admin, payroll, marketing. You're managing all the things, so why waste time sending important documents the old-fashioned way? Mail and ship when you want, how you want with Stamps.com. Print postage on demand 24/7 and schedule pickups from your office or home. Save up to 90% with automated rate shopping. That's why over 1 million small businesses trust Stamps.com. Go to Stamps.com and use code PODCAST to try Stamps.com risk-free for 60 days.
This is the first episode in a two-part series, and the third series in our latest season covering cold cases across the United States. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are solely the interviewee's own. All individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. This series discusses crime scenes, violence, and homicide. Listener discretion is advised. This is The Fall Line. Last season, we told you about Eric Nellums, a Columbus, Georgia-born veteran and father who'd moved to Phoenix City, Alabama with his family. It's a town just over the state line, along the Chattahoochee River and on the easternmost edge. When we told you about Eric's murder, how he'd been shot to death in his own driveway in September of 2003, and that no one had ever been arrested for the crime, we were already working with another Alabama family who were facing the same frustrations. Another murder, a likely connected case long solved, and investigative leads they felt had never fully been followed through. This time, though, the tragedy had unfolded almost 200 miles northwest of Phoenix City, in Blount County, in the Appalachian foothills of the state. That's where 18-year-old Christian Boyle lived, in the tiny town of Cleveland, population less than 2,000. He'd grown up there with his twin brother Brandon. The boys were raised by their great-aunt and their great-uncle, Kerry and George, who adopted them when they were 6. George had broken his neck in a car accident years before the twins were born, and as a result was quadriplegic. Though Kerry and George hadn't expected to raise 2 little boys, they managed, and Brandon said they instilled a lot of values that he holds important to this day. Christian was an outgoing, friendly teenager who loved his family, friends, cars, the rodeo, and had talked about all kinds of career paths, maybe becoming a lawyer or even a neurologist. The twins were highly intelligent, and both had tested into the gifted program when they were young. But Christian, who was diagnosed with ADHD, also struggled to focus, and his brother told us that he sometimes had conflict at school too. He didn't necessarily start fights, but Brandon said he would finish them. They had both had a rough time in their late teens, and worry for their father was a part of that. George's health had taken a turn when the boys were in middle school. By 2017, he'd been on a ventilator for 6 years, and Kerry was providing full-time care for him. In December of 2017, Brandon, fresh from boot camp, was away for engineer training with the Marines, and as for Christian, he was working construction with his best friend. His mother, Kerry, told us that he checked in often at home to make sure that George was doing all right. He'd come by to do laundry, to chat, to eat, pretty much what you'd expect from any 18-year-old who just started making their own way in the world. On Tuesday morning, December 12th, Christian called Kerry like he always did. He asked about George, and he told her he'd be by the house to do laundry after work. But he never showed. And then, that evening, Kerry didn't get her usual goodnight text from Christian, so she tried calling, but his phone was off. By Wednesday, December 13th, Kerry was worried. A series of strange phone calls and inconsistent texts exchanged with a friend of Christian did not make her feel any better. And he had not gone to get his paycheck. When Kerry learned that, she called the sheriff. But she says the officer told her Christian was 18. As an adult, he was allowed to be out of contact. It would be days before a report was taken. In the meantime, with no resources available, Kerry told us that their family and friends began to search the rural backroads and woods of Blount County. Their efforts went on for more than a week. Finally, according to Alabama Cold Case Advocacy, quote, a group of people out riding ATVs on Cold Branch Road spotted a 2001 silver Oldsmobile Alero, a vehicle that matched the description of Christian's car. They called the sheriff's department. When deputies arrived, they found Christian's body outside the vehicle. He'd been shot and left in the wooded area. The discovery came 13 days after he went missing. On December 10th, 2017, 2 days before Christian disappeared, another young man was shot. That crime occurred in Birmingham, Alabama, less than an hour away from Cleveland. Terrell Guy Jr., 21, a former high school basketball star, was shot in his friend's apartment. He died of his injuries soon after emergency services arrived. By December 22nd, 2 men had been arrested for his murder. They were both convicted in 2022. The connection between the deaths of Christian Boyle and Terrell Guy Jr. has never been officially made, at least not through the naming of suspects responsible for both crimes. The implication has always been there, though. But what happened to Terrell and what happened to Christian, there seems to be an obvious causal link. Christian was there the night that Terrell Guy Jr. was killed. He was a witness to the crime. And now, 8 years later, one case is closed and the guilty party's convicted. And the other, it's still open. And Brandon Boyle, who was only 18 when his twin was murdered, is now 26. After a stint in the Marines, he's back in the Southeast, and he's teaching himself the ins and outs of Alabama legal code in the hopes that he can gain public records access to information that might move his brother's case forward. So far, all his requests have been denied. Christian's murder was initially investigated by the Blount County Sheriff's Office. By 2020, the investigation had moved to the Blount County District Attorney's Office, which then requested assistance from the Alabama Attorney General's Cold Case Unit. In 2023, the DA clarified that the AG's office had only reviewed the case. The DA's office had retained control of the investigation. We reached out to both the DA and the Sheriff's Office for comment on Christian's case, but we didn't hear back. Christian's family wants to work with any and all investigators to find out what happened and to finally see his case to resolution. They've got a lot of unanswered questions, and the fervent hope that more transparency and open communication might help lead to what everyone in Blount County ultimately wants: Christian's murderer or murderers brought to justice. Because it has been far too long, and the rumor mill, it's been working overtime. Nothing hits like home cooking, and HelloFresh makes it easy to do more of it this year with recipes that feel good and taste delicious night after night. My family actually just enjoyed the one-pot cowboy turkey and black bean chili, and it was a massive hit. Chili is my husband and son's absolute favorite, and I love that I can just throw it all together in one pot and have it turn out perfectly every single time. It makes a busy weeknight feel so much more manageable, and it's so rewarding to bring everyone together with meals that are simple and satisfying. With HelloFresh, you can choose from more than 100 recipes every week, including cuisines from around the world and meals specifically designed to help you beat the winter blues. They also offer bigger portions now to satisfy everyone, which is a must in my house. What's really impressive is the variety of specialized plans. You can choose from more than 35 high-protein recipes every week, including Mediterranean and GLP-1 friendly options. I feel great about the wholesome ingredients that I'm serving, like 100% antibiotic and hormone-free chicken and sustainably sourced seafood. And there's actually 3 times the seafood now for no upcharge. You can even treat yourself to new grass-fed steak ribeyes and seasonal produce like pears, apples, and asparagus. My family loves HelloFresh, and I know you will too, because when dinner tastes this good, nothing hits like home cooking. Go to HelloFresh.com/fallline10FM to get 10 free meals and a free Zwilling knife, a $144.99 value on your 3rd box. Offer valid while supplies last. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan.
Imagine you're a business owner relying on a dozen different software programs. Each one is expensive, overly complicated, and worst of all, none of them are connected. It can be incredibly stressful, right? Now, picture Odoo. CRM, accounting, inventory, manufacturing, marketing, HR, and more. Odoo brings all the tools your business needs into one simple platform, and all seamlessly connected. Everything works together, giving you the peace of mind that your business is running smoothly from every angle. Odoo's open source applications are user-friendly and designed to scale with your business, saving you time and money. Say goodbye to juggling multiple platforms and hello to efficient integrated management. Stop wasting resources on complicated systems and make the switch to Odoo today. Visit odoo.com, ODOO.com, and discover how Odoo can simplify and streamline your business operations. Odoo, modern management made simple.
We spoke with Brandon and his mother, Kerry, late last year about Christian, their lives, and everything that led up to his disappearance and death, and what came after. Brandon began by giving us background on their childhood.
We're fraternal twins, but our personalities probably were even more different than the way we looked. Like, he had dark hair and dark eyes. He was a bit shorter than me pretty much all of our lives. And most of my childhood, from all first memories, 3 to 6, I was the quiet one, more shy. Remember when I first got adopted by my great aunt and great uncle, I would kind of hide in the bedroom every time company was over. And my twin brother couldn't have been any different. You know, he'd always be the center of attention. He'd always be in there cracking jokes and lighting up the room with just his personality. And I kind of eased out of my shyness as I got a little bit older. But I mean, it was kind of because we were abused growing up by our biological parents. They were on drugs and stuff. My biological mom decided she was going to get clean and decided she needed to go to rehab, and she sent her kids off elsewhere. We were in and out of kindergartens, getting kicked out of houses, evicted out of apartments, all kinds of crazy stuff. So when we actually went into the first grade, we got adopted, I think, a month or 2 prior to our first grade. And we didn't know how to read. We didn't know how to write, couldn't spell our name. It was pretty bad. So when Kerry and George took care of us, they did such a great job getting us prepped in those couple of months for school. So well of a job that Christian actually was put in the gifted program in the first grade. But one of the teachers saw that he was smart as a whip and tested his IQ, and it tested with flying colors. So he was in the gifted program, and I ended up in the gifted program the next year in second grade. And as you can imagine, our bond together was inseparable. Anything he did, I would do. He's getting into trouble, I'm getting into trouble. You know, so I worked out of my shyness just being with my twin brother. And with my dad's disability, we learned how to, I guess, take care of others before taking care of ourselves. You know, at the age of 8, we were taking care of our dad, helping him get into the wheelchair, helping him get into bed, stuff like that. And he did a great job of teaching us good life lessons, you know, like be respectful, be kind. Like, somebody's probably got it worse off than you, you know, and that coming from somebody who can't move his arms and legs, it had a whole lot more meaning, you know, and he never let his disability get him down. He was quite a exceptional human being. He was on the news and papers and stuff because he'd worked with a trade school. They built him a remote control lawnmower that he would mow the grass with, and he was on Helping Hands, a TV show, because he had a monkey, a capuchin monkey, that kind of helped him with everyday tasks like flipping a tape in a VCR, or turning the page of a magazine, flipping a light switch. Super cool experience as a 6 to 8 year old, like actually getting to witness these things and to be a part of it, you know, in a loving, caring environment. We were always in church, just loved the story and the traditions of it. Easter as well, that was another one of his big holidays. We do all these things. As we got older, playing sports and everything, Dad did what you'd think unthinkable. He was our football coach. He was our baseball coach. He'd be out there on the field with us. I remember one time he was a third base coach. He'd take us hunting. He'd take us fishing. He taught us how to shoot guns, how to build a fire, change a tire, all these things that you need to know growing up. Our dad was there teaching us these things.
Brandon said, as for Kerry, she wore a lot of hats. Mother, support for George, and earning money to keep the family going.
She worked hard. She was a nurse. I'd get up at 5 a.m. and go sit with Dad and watch a show with him after she had left. She was there. Dad was there, and just most of our life lessons about how to be respectful and how to be courteous, how to be honorable, courageous, trustworthy, just learning the power of hard work and learning how to do things for yourself and to never let anything get in your way is kind of the biggest moral that I learned growing up, especially watching my dad do all of the things that he had done. And getting older, Christian would kind of grow into a personality similar to my dad's. Just my dad had a way of talking to people, and so did my brother.
Kerry agreed. She remembers Christian had a big personality, even as a kid, but she mostly recalls how sweet they both were.
Yeah, I remember the first time they got in trouble. They were in first grade, and we put them in separate classes because Christian was so much more outgoing than Brandon, and we thought that would help Brandon, kind of come out of his shell and make his own friends and everything. And they passed each other in the hall and got out of line and gave each other a hug, and they got in trouble for that. Which I know they weren't supposed to get out of line, but I thought, how can you get on to two brothers that just want to get out and say hello and hug each other, Yeah, neither one of them were ever afraid to show their affection for each other or for anybody else. If I was cooking, he came in there and helped me cook, and he wanted to learn how to cook. He wanted to learn how to wash dishes, but that didn't last long. If I'd be in the bathroom putting on my makeup, he would come in there and sit and talk. I asked him one day why he wanted to watch me put on my makeup, and his dad was paralyzed, and he said, because if I ever marry somebody that's like Dad, I need to know how to put their makeup on. He was really sweet. He always said he wanted to be a doctor so he could find a cure for his dad.
George felt that teaching the twins to set goals for themselves was one of the best motivators.
He sat down with us when we were about 14-year-old. He made an agreement with us that you make $1,000 in a year before your 15th birthday, I'll spot you $1,000 so you'll have $2,000 to buy your first car. And if you make $2,000, then I'll spot you $2,000 to get you a $4,000 car. So we started riding our bicycles with a push mower chained to the back and a weed eater tied to the handlebars and gas can on both sides, him with one bicycle, me with the other, careful not to go down a hill too fast. And we ended up meeting this fella probably about a mile away from the house, and he had him a nice little cow farm there, about 100 acres and about 80 heads of cattle. He had a son that was about a year older than us, and he was homeschooled, and they rodeoed. Now, where we grew up, we'd been to a couple rodeos and always wore cowboy boots and had the hats and everything. But this was our first opportunity to experience the rodeo lifestyle. And he fell in love with it. I fell in love with it. So he's wearing boots and wearing hats and just enjoying being a kid, chewing tobacco and being outside, throwing ropes at bicycles, and then when he gets out there to the fella's land, riding horses and doing that whole thing. And as for education, he'd always talk about being a doctor, to go to school to learn how to fix Dad's back, fix Dad's neck. Now, would he ever? I don't know. He'd always talk a big talk to everybody. He'd always say what you wanted to hear. Mom thought he'd go to be a lawyer. I know he wanted to fix people. Here's the thing. He wanted to do something good. I do know that.
As the boys got older, though, things became more complicated.
I don't know. It seems like when boys get in high school and start getting interested in girls and all, they're just not as interested in school. Brandon still made good grades, but not as good as he could have. But Christian struggled a lot, but it was more just not wanting to do it than not being able to do it. Sitting still and not being able to talk to people was torture for him. He had ADHD too, so that didn't help. But yeah, he struggled to pay attention and focus because he would rather be up talking. He wanted everybody to like him. He trusted everybody. And I would tell him all the time, you got to be careful.
Kerry told us that Christian could be generally impulsive too. He had a tendency to speed, and he got multiple tickets in his first few months of driving. She and George decided that he'd have to sell the car he'd bought and get a slower, older model for safety. And Brandon told us that there were other issues too.
He'd get in trouble at school for picking fights. Well, not really picking fights, but finishing fights. He was about a head shorter than I was, and it ended up being the reason he got homeschooled towards the end of his high school career. And to get into like the age of 16, I started getting into a lot of trouble. I started rebelling, kind of doing what I wanted to do. And Christian took the attention of everything. I guess I was getting in trouble to get some attention.
At that time, Brandon said that he was sent to live at a boys' home in response to his own behavioral issues. Christian remained behind in Cleveland.
So that was really the first time that me and my brother were separated for the most part. Because growing up, we had been pretty much conjoined at the hip. But Dad got sick. He got into the hospital and ended up getting pneumonia and had a trachea put back in. So he couldn't use his vocal cords anymore. I left home. Christian just kind of doing his thing. And when your dad loses his vocal cords and he can't yell at you, a boy who's bigger than his mom is probably going to do what he wants. And good luck telling him he can't. And he started hanging out with different people and leaving school to go smoke pot and going to do this and going to do that. And I remember I came back when I got kicked out of that boys' home and ended up staying with my mom and dad for probably about 6 months before I ended up reconnecting with my biological mom. She had been sober for probably 10 years, and she pitched me this story that she's better. She'll give me this, she'll give me that, she'll give me this. And I fell into it, and my brother also had kind of fell into it. And the plan was for both of us to leave and go stay with her. And I remember one day we had gotten in trouble for skipping school to go hang out with them a couple of towns over. And we had a doctor's appointment that nobody told us about. So when we weren't at school, Mom comes to pick us up for this doctor's appointment. Like, it's a whole big deal. We've been skipping school. We ended up getting grounded and everything, and Dad being bedbound and his vocal cords not being able to use those. As soon as Mom went into the bathroom, me and Christian grabbed the keys off the hook and got in the car and left. And we're technically running away, missing persons and all. So we ended up talking to our biological mom, and we were going to have her adopt us, quote unquote, take custody of us again. But my brother had a change of heart. I guess he didn't want to leave Dad, and Dad being in as sick a condition as he was, and we're never knowing if today's going to be his last or if tomorrow will be. We've been thinking that since we were 10 years old. So he decided he was going to stay and help Dad. And I ended up living with my biological mom again. And that kind of was a turning point in our relationship again, because the day that I left home was pretty quick. The lawyer was there when I got home from school, and Christian had ended up not taking the bus, ended up going home with a buddy of his to go smoke pot. And I was supposed to cover for him. He got mad at Mom and Dad, and he was just going to walk home, But what happened was I left home. I didn't get to say goodbye, and he didn't forgive me, and it took about a year for him to actually talk to me again. And I was already by that point in time getting lined up to be in the Marine Corps.
With the brothers distant, emotionally and physically, because of Brandon's enlistment, he didn't keep close tabs on Christian for a while. He was surprised to find out what was going on in his twin's life back in Cleveland. He told us that his brother had dropped out and was being homeschooled, but wasn't completing the coursework. Christian had begun hanging out with different people and had lost interest in a lot of the hobbies that they'd shared.
All his friends would come over and they'd drink vodka in the garage, smoke pot, and do whatever. And he ended up, having been homeschooled, ended up stopping school and flunking out. And I was in the military, in the Marine Corps, and I didn't know any of this stuff. I get back from boot camp and realized he doesn't have his high school diploma, and I hang out with him and I see all these behaviors that he's gotten into, and I'm like, hey guy, like, what are you doing? Like, this ain't you. And he told me he was going to get his GED. He was going to do this. He was going to do that. Just hanging out with the wrong people in the wrong place, trying to be the cool guy, the guy everybody wants to hang out with. I remember I went to a party with him and a bunch of college kids, and everything's fine. I mean, nothing crazy. Just a kid wanting to party like everybody does at that age, you know. It had to have been like 2017 in August, something like that. Most of them I'd never met. And the friend group was weird. It's weird because, as you can imagine, all the guys that he and I knew back when we were rodeoing and doing the whole cowboy thing is a different group of friends than when he started smoking and doing all the party stuff with all of his buddies.
Brandon said it was through a male neighbor that Christian met several people, including a young woman who became an important figure shortly after his disappearance, whose names have come up frequently since December of 2017.
This friend group was more of a partying friend group and not really a guys he played football with or anything like that. It's just guys he met as he's smoking. Another guy will come in. They're like, oh, here's my guy I knew forever. You know, that kind of thing. I don't think he knew most of them. He might knew them by name, but it's not like he had them in his phone. Most of these people are just coming by happenstance. And that's why that girl is so central, in my opinion.
I don't think he would have personally called them in a relationship, but they were definitely seeing each other casually.
The female friend and the male neighbor were two that Christian seemed to know a little better and to spend more time with one-on-one. That's the impression his family has, at least. Kerry was familiar with his best friend Nick and his roommate, but had not met the new people in his life. Since Christian was living with a friend, Kerry just didn't know a lot about his day-to-day movements.
I didn't even know anything about these people till he'd been missing 3 or 4 days. And the friend that lived down the road, his mother, come and told me about these people that he'd been hanging around.
So was it December 12th that you were last in touch with Christian?
Yes, he called me that morning. He called me every day. And that morning, he called to check on his dad and told me he was going to come and do laundry that afternoon when he got off work. And he just never showed up. I wasn't panicked. You know, I was kind of a little worried because, you know, I just thought they probably got home from work late and he didn't feel like coming and doing his laundry. But normally around 10, 11 o'clock, he would text and say goodnight, and he loved us. And I didn't get a text that night. And then, you know, I tried to call him, couldn't get an answer. And the next day, I tried calling him all day. And then about 2 o'clock that afternoon on the 13th, I was sectioning George and I couldn't get to my cell phone. And I got a call on my cell phone. So as soon as I got through sectioning George, probably 30 seconds later, I went over there and looked at my cell phone, and it was a number I didn't recognize, which was not uncommon for Christian to have to call from somebody else's phone because he never remembered to charge his. So I called the number back to see if it was Christian, and it was this girl. And she told me that, yeah, Christian was the one that called, but he'd already left and went to the store. And so I just, you know, said, okay, when he gets back, have him call me. Which, I kind of thought it was odd because usually if Christian didn't get me on my cell phone, he called me on the house phone. If he didn't get me on the house phone, he'd call until he got me. So Thursday morning, I tried her again. I tried his phone. I tried her again. And she gave me a different story. Every time she texted me about it, she would tell me something different about where he went from when he left her house. And so that's when I called the police.
Kerry called the Blount County Sheriff's Office on Thursday, December 14th. She was told that because Christian was an adult, he was allowed to be out of contact. No missing persons report was filed. That same day was Christian's payday. Kerry recalled that when she checked in, she found out that he hadn't picked up his check. She reached out to his friends. No one had seen him. His phone was still off. When she got online, she realized he hadn't been active on social media either. Kerry told us that she and George were certain by then that something had happened to Christian. They started thinking through possibilities. Blount County is full of winding back roads through wooded areas. Christian loved to go exploring and off-roading. Maybe he'd had an accident somewhere remote, and he hadn't been able to reach out for help. With no official assistance coming, Kerry contacted family and friends for support. Christian's best friend Nick began a solo search, driving the roads that Christian usually traveled, looking for any sign of a wreck. A family friend, who's also named Brandon, he went to see Christian's other friends, trying to piece together when anyone had last seen him. Then, on Sunday night, December 17th, Kerry said she was told that Christian was allegedly last seen at a local home with some of his new friends, including the young woman that she'd spoken to. Their family friend Brandon, he went to the house to check things out. Christian's car was not there, but he knocked on the door anyway. He could hear people inside, but no one came to answer the door. So he went to enlist the help of a relative, law enforcement from a nearby county, and they returned together to try again. Still, there was no answer. Kerry explained that the law enforcement officer made a call to express concern for Christian, who he had known through family for years. Christian was not the type to fall out of contact, especially considering George's ill health. It was around 9 or 10 that night that a Blount County Sheriff's deputy came out to Kerry and George's place to take a report. Christian was officially a missing person, gone by that point for 5 days. And word had gotten out around town, too. Brandon knows that because it reached him in North Carolina.
I go back to engineer school and get a text message from a girl in high school that I didn't even really like that much, but she was like, "Hey, your brother's missing?" And I was like, "You're out of your mind." So I called my mom. She's like, "I just didn't want to tell you. I didn't want to worry you." So I blew up. I was mad as all get out. I was like, "Why would you think that that's a good idea to just not tell me?" Did he just go hang out with a girl? Because he went to Kentucky one time to go meet a girl. Just hopped on a plane to Kentucky to meet a girl one time. Like he rambunctious, spontaneous, but everything was amiss this time. Like he took clothes over to mom's house to wash them and never came back to get his clothes. And if you've ever met a teenage boy, like he's in a new pair of clothes every 4 hours. And he thought he was hot stuff, so he'd be taking his shirt off here, taking his shirt off there, this, that, and the other. He always cared about what he looked like. So it was weird that he didn't come pick up his clothes. It was weird that he wasn't on social media. It's weird that he wasn't answering none of his friends. He wasn't calling mom and dad every night to see if dad was okay.
That was roughly a week after Christian made last contact with his parents. As Brandon went through the official process to request emergency leave, efforts continued in Blount County to find his brother. Kerry had to stay home with George. He needed round-the-clock care, so friends, family, and neighbors came together to help.
Christian was so well known and so well liked throughout the community that it wasn't just the family who was looking. Everybody who had heard of it was likely in some capacity involved, either asking questions, looking in part of the search effort. Brandon, a family friend of ours, he searched day in and day out. All the roads they thought he traveled, maybe he had an accident and got ejected. All his usual hanging out places, maybe he OD'd. Like, we had no idea what had happened to him. So when I start calling around, like, where's my brother at? Nobody had any clue either. He's not on social media. Last he was seen with that girl, she picked him up from work, and then her story is unreliable. Every time you talk to her, it's something different. And that's if you can talk to her. Because she stopped answering her phone, I think, a day or two after he went missing.
Brandon told us that on Monday, December 18th, Kerry and her father went to the sheriff's office. A family friend stayed with George. That's when they learned that no detective had been assigned to Christian's case. They explained that a sergeant was promoted to detective that day, specifically to handle it. The searches continued, and by the time that Brandon arrived in town, a massive effort, nearly county-wide, was planned for December 26th. But then, some boys out on their ATVs on Christmas night stumbled upon Christian's car out on a quiet road. By the time law enforcement had been to the scene, the small town of Cleveland was buzzing with the news. It was so quick, Kerry said, that she didn't even have time to get a call.
It was already on Facebook before we even knew anything. It was on Facebook that his car had been found. They didn't say anything about finding him, but it was on Facebook that his car had been found, and Brandon seen that. And he came home, and then, we were all there when they finally called us and wanted us to come to the sheriff's office. I was not thinking about anybody murdering him. I don't remember them asking me anything that night. I just remember them telling me that they'd found him, that he was dead, that somebody had killed him. I guess they could have asked me some questions. Honestly, I don't remember. I think I was just, as soon as they said he was dead, I think I was just in a fog. I barely even remember going back home. I remember walking in the house and running there and laying down on George, crying.
They'd been dreading bad news, but their thoughts had circled around a car accident and not homicide. And there was something else. The other young man, Terrell Guy Jr., who had been murdered in Birmingham 2 weeks before. The investigation into his death would link Terrell Guy Jr. to Christian Boyle. Christian, who'd been witness to the crime and then had disappeared. Next time on The Fall Line, we continue the story of Christian Boyle, the investigation into his murder, the discovery of what is known and what is suspected regarding December of 2017, and what his brother Brandon is fighting to see accomplished to resolve his case. If you have any information about the murder of Christian Boyle, please contact the Blount County DA at 205-973-0507 or Crime Stoppers at 205-254-7777. If you know of a case that should be covered on The Fall Line, there's a link to our case submission form in the show notes. Thanks for listening. The Fall Line is an independent podcast, and we appreciate listener support. It allows us to do research, obtain FOIA, pay our content advisors, and support and donate to the causes we care about. Our therapy fund is paid for through Patreon and Apple Premium subscriptions. If you try out the products we advertise, please use our sponsor codes. It really helps. And please, take a moment to rate and review our show in your podcast app of choice. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to check your subscription to make sure you're set for automatic downloads so that you don't miss an episode. My book, Lay Them to Rest, is out everywhere. Find out more through the link in our show notes. The Fall Line is written, hosted, and researched by Laura Norton. Interviews by Brooke Hargrove. Engineered by Southern Gothic Media and Rachel Boyd. Content advisement by Vic Kennedy and Brandy C. Williams. Special thanks to Liz Lipka.